6'10" bencher over here in the meet, so there's a couple of things. So we're going to go over the bench press now. A couple of things we want to work on. So kind of like with the squat, you're going to start to kind of dial things up as we go through the setup. In particular with the bench and the deadlift, they have a little bit more of the commonality, where one of the things that we kind of teach is you start in a really poor position, and that's going to allow you to finish in a better position. Okay, so it'll make more sense once we see the squat and once we see the deadlift and the bench setup. A couple of just equipment type things, just if you guys are aware. That's like more of a competition style pad. This is a fat pad, so this is actually not really necessarily legal dimensions of the pad, but what are some reasons why you might want to benefit? You might benefit from using a fat pad in training. It's gonna, if you see, like, you can just turn this way so you can see your back. So a normal commercial gym pad bench might only cover like this much of his back. So that's going to allow a lot of shoulder rotation, and it's going to create some pec problems for him. So even though you want to work on specificity, especially in the off season, especially far out from a competition training, something like a fat pad can be very beneficial, because more of his scapula, his shoulder blades are going to be covered, and it's going to put him in a better position to keep that chest up. Okay. So like we talked, thank you. So like we talked about before, and Larry's going to demonstrate again. We're going to roll the shoulders forward. And just pretend like you're benching in the bottom. And roll your, yeah, I know you do it bad. So, especially in some areas, you see a lot of people, they try to use momentum, and they're sacrificing a lot of shoulder position here, which is not, it's a kind of a junk technique.
Kind of looks almost like an equipped.
So the reason why you might see that in a bench shirt
Yep.
is to help get that last inch to touch. And even since the shoulder joint is under compressive forces from the shirt, not necessarily it's safe, but it's safer, and they can get away with it. Whereas a raw bencher, his shoulder is going to be vulnerable here, because that's where the loading is going to be. Okay. So we want to make sure we're going to roll the shoulders forward, bad position, roll the shoulders back, hard and down, and then just get you in a bench position. So you can see that there's a lot of length here. So if you think about like a slingshot, we're loading that muscle, explode. So here, if we're compressed, it's not really long, and we can't really utilize the pecs really well here. But if we can stretch the pecs, engage the back, we put the shoulder in a good position, we're going to limit shoulder rotation, okay, and it's going to allow for a better stretch reflex and a more powerful start. So one of the things that Larry's worked on a lot over the years was, again, a more controlled descent. He's working on stability, and he's gathering tension, building up tension on the way down, and then exploding through it. That's why you guys said, Larry, just put your hand up so they can see like where so right here. So this would be like kind of a poor position, right? My shoulders are untucked, back is flat, chest is forward. So we're going to start in a poor position, which I am, and we're going to get in a good position. So one thing, I like to use the bench for leverage. I like to get in that glute bridge position. That's going to drive all the weight in my traps. I'm going to walk my feet toward my shoulders and my shoulders toward my feet. See the difference? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Cut down a couple inches, okay? So I'm minimizing shoulder rotation. I'm cutting down the range of motion. It's safer. It's more efficient. I'm going to have bigger lifts and better shoulder health. Okay, so now you can come back on. Why is it okay for my ribs to be flared and my back to be a little extended in the bench? Okay. The biggest difference between squat and the deadlift and the bench, the shoulder joint is primarily loaded. The spine is not loaded. So a little lordosis, a little arch is okay. Now, I don't think you need to be like Mariana. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mariana from like Russia, but like where you need to kind of bend in half like a pretzel. We're trying to get most of the range of motion from our upper back and our hips. Remember, from the joint by joint, thoracic spine is a more mobile joint. Hips are a more mobile joint. Okay, so our natural lordotic curve is okay. We're not trying to crank on the lower back. We're trying to get hip extension and upper back extension. So that's why the arch is okay. Feet flat versus feet tucked. As far as The feet flat is going to give you more stability, usually more leg drive. The feet tuck is going to allow you for a higher arch and a little bit less range of motion. Both can be useful. Some federations you have to have your feet flat, so a heeled shoe can be important for that because it's going to give you that extra plantar flexion and allow you to have a little bit more grounding in your feet. As far as what you should be doing, you can just get behind me again. So I'm going to show the feet tucked position really quick. So the setting is exactly the same, except instead of sliding my feet out, I'm just going to keep my feet here. And if you notice, what does this kind of look like? Bench. So yeah, so we're building on those positions. So the foot flat, like kind of where you put your feet, is going to be very similar to a squat. And then I can just focus on leg drive the same way. So this is something you can practice. Okay. If I'm here, I still drive my heels down. This is something you can practice to get that leg drive. Okay?
Is there somewhere where your ankle should be if you're flat-footed? For instance, if you're...
Basically, the rule is that your knee joint has to be below your hip joint's the rule. So some people have their feet out, like one of our coaches, Benny. Some people have their feet tucked. The rule is that your knee joint needs to be below your hip joint's the rule. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because if your ankles are further up than your knees, when you
If
kind of do
you're-
a glute bridge and almost lift off the bench.
Yeah, so you may need to pull your feet
Yeah.
back in order. So you have to play with your foot position
Yeah.
a little bit because obviously your femur length and your tibia
Yeah.
length is all going to be a factor. So that's something we're going to play with here today. But in general, if you put your feet backwards and wider, that helps your butt from not coming up.
Yeah.
So you have to you want leg drive, but you also don't want your hips to come up. So you should be able to push as hard as possible and not have your butt come up. That's when you know you're in a pretty good position.
Okay.
Another thing is think about pushing back because we're trying to transfer force into the bar versus pushing the hips up. So think about driving back. So I'm driving my shoulders into the bench and I'm trying to push this way. So part of it's just intent as well. So I'm not trying to actually actively push my butt up. I'm trying to push back into the bar. So I'm going to just show feet tucked really quick. So, leverage versus range of motion, you got to decide what's better for you. Whatever. As I've gotten lighter, I've preferred feet tucked when I've been a super heavy lifter. So like my best, shirted bench is with a flat foot when I was a super heavyweight. And I've done better with my feet tucked when I'm lighter and get a better arch. So it's just kind of whatever. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any questions on foot positions? Yeah, knee joint needs to be lower than the hip. So I don't know. This looks like kind of in line. Yes.
Yep.
So that's not really a great position. So here, see how my knee joint is lower than my hip now? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. Better position. Cool. All right. So I can come back out. Grip width. If you have a lot of internal rotation, you maybe have a closer grip. If you don't, go a little wider in general. Wrist stacked over elbow is a good place to start, okay? Close grip bench, what's the advantage? Powerful off the chest. Disadvantage, longer range of motion, harder lockout. Wide grip bench, more leverage, less range of motion, harder off the chest. More chest and shoulder emphasis, less tricep emphasis, easier to lock out. So there's a trade-off. Matt Wenning, 600-pound bench, raw, close grip, and then you see some of these girls, they just they're super wide and it's super efficient. So it's trade-off. So it depends on what's good. If you do have some bicep problems, I find going a little bit wide, it may seem counterintuitive, but going a little wider because you're not as jammed up here. Also, as far as the close grip bench, you can see he's got a better muscle. See how his forearm runs into his bicep? That's going to provide some compression and spring out of the bottom. Okay, so by increasing your form and bicep size, that potentially could actually improve your bench leverages. Same thing if you're a close stance squatter. The advantage of a close stance squat versus a wide stance squat. Wide stance squat, a lot of leverage. Not as much leverage, a lot less range of motion, more hips. Close stance squat, if you get a big quad, big hamstring and big calf, bounce it off, like something like JP Price comes to mind. A lot of leverage there, a lot of compression exploded out of the hole. Trade-off. So depends on how you're built also. So if you're really super skinny and you only have a forearm or a bicep, you don't have a calf or a hamstring, you're not going to be able to take advantage of those positions as well.